Hello BookTube and welcome to Tag Tuesday. Today I'm going to be doing the D Tag, created once again by Jim of Jim's Books, Reading, and Stuff. Over the past few weeks he's been doing the alphabet tag, one letter a week with multiple questions or prompts for each letter. Earlier he did an A to Z tag that was each letter asked a question or was a prompt, and they were grouped in, I think there were 3 individual prompts that some of us did as one big complete alphabet, which I think was what I did. Anyway, let's get started. D is for Dahl. What is your favorite book by Roald Dahl? James the Giant Peach, because that is the only Roald Dahl novel I've ever read. I know he's written a number of other staples of children's literature, Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Big Friendly Giant, The Witches, and others. But I've only ever read James and the Giant Peach. Largely, I think, because it was one of those books that was on offer from the Scholastic Children's Catalog, or somebody bought it for me for my birthday. I don't quite remember which. It's been forever since I read it. It's about a young boy named James who's living with his aunts who are unpleasant, almost certainly abusive, and who one day finds a giant peach and climbs it. And the peach ends up going into the ocean, and while sailing with the peach, James encounters a number of giant, sentient, humanoid, or anthropomorphic, whatever, insects, including a spider, a grasshopper, a ladybug, and others. And they kind of form a bit of a found family until the peach washes to the shore somewhere. I mean, it has been a long time since I've read it, and I haven't gone back to it. And the other Roald Dahl novels I've never read. I've seen some of them in adaptation. I mean, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, is a staple of, with Gene Wilder, is a staple of probably classroom watching. And I wouldn't be surprised if BFG has enjoyed it. I'm not entirely sure about Matilda. I've seen bits of it and not very impressed with it, but anyway. D is also for Doctor Who, of which I think I might have seen some episodes from the 80s or 90s iteration or something, when it was on PBS. I want to say it might have been the Tom Baker, but I could be wrong. I likely am wrong. What is your favorite book about time travel? I honestly don't think I've really ever read anything that dealt with time travel as the main subject of the book. I know some science books that deal with science fiction elements and the possibility of them, I think, have touched on time travel. And I've never read any novels that featured time travel as the main component of the story. But there is one of my favorite manga, Fairy Tale, does deal with time travel. One of the recurring villains who later redeems herself, Ulter Milkovich, her power, or her magical power, is primarily a time manipulation called Arc of Time, where she can manipulate the time of an object. an inanimate object, and plants. I'm not entirely sure about animals, but her powers do not affect humans. Um, so her powers can either speed, decay, or restore an item. It can also pluck an object from multiple point timelines, like temporal possibilities, to create a multitude of those items and telekinetically throw all of them at you, as well as other things. And her arc is one of the reasons why I really love Fairy Tale. It is just such a powerful arc. And I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't mention this in the A tag. But I'm on a bit of a manga kick lately, so don't be surprised if some of these questions don't eventually involve something with manga. But anyway, so it would be Fairy Tale. I think, yeah. D is for dark. What is the darkest book you have read? I want to say that book would be Mirror Empire, or by Kameron Hurley, or The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. Yeah. So the Mirror Empire is about a grimdark world that is invaded by an even more grimdark world, alternate world. And it is just inordinately dark and depressing. And The Darkness That Comes Before is about a very dark and depressing world that's threatened by this sort of anti-god being. And it is, again, incredibly dark. D is for Dickens. How many Dickens novels have you read? There are 15, including The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I've read 3, and I bailed on 2. So I've read A Christmas Carol twice, I think. Once when I was a child, and from a mass market paperback, and largely probably inspired by The Muppets Christmas Carol, the best adaptation of A Christmas Carol ever. And then again in an omnibus of Dickens' shorter novels when I was in high school, and I quite like it. I've also read A Tale of Two Cities, primarily in a Great Illustrated Classics edition, which I would make a habit of every few months, sit down and just read the entire book in one day, and really enjoyed it. I think that was Tale of Two Cities was also in the omnibus that included A Christmas Carol, but I don't think I've ever read it in that edition. And then the third one is Bleak House, one of his big novels, which I read for a class and actually really enjoyed. I bailed on Our Mutual Friend. I watched I'm thinking it's a BBC adaptation. I mean, in the United States it would have aired on PBS as Masterpiece Theater, and I quite liked it, so I wanted to read the book. And I tried A Mutual Friend 2 or 3 times, and I bailed each time. And then I tried, I think it's The Old Curiosity Shop, once or twice. I checked it out from my local library and never got into it. So that, you got it? D is for dictionary. In these internet years, do you still use physical paper dictionaries? Yes, sometimes. I have a Merriam-Webster that's almost 20 years old, that I bought when I was in college. Oh, yeah. And it's currently being used to flatten a piece of UArt paper. that I've been meaning to draw on. One of the things that annoys me about UArt is it has a tendency to curl if you don't use it relatively immediately. And I've had this paper for a year or so or more. And I do like UArt. It's a really good paper. But that curling drives me insane. D is for Dagger and Detective. What was the last detective novel you read? The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie. So earlier this year, I'd intended to read one of the Agatha Christie omnibuses I have. Particularly one that I hadn't read many of the stories from. Excuse me, and that edition included Murder at the Vicarage, Dead Man's Folly, Sad Cypress, Towards Zero, and NRM. And I kind of ended the project after Dead Man's Folly. And in March, for March Mystery Madness, Steve Donahue and David Murphy, who really needs to make some more videos, did a March Mystery Madness project, in which Steve Donahue selected a number of mystery novels or detective novels, and he and David and anybody else who wanted to join in I'd read. And the second novel in this series was The Body in the Library, which I have. I think I actually might have The Body in the Library in two different books. But it's one of my favorite Agatha Christie novels, and certainly my second favorite Miss Marple novel, and I would say probably the best of the Miss Marple novels. It's about, obviously, the body of a young woman showing up in the library of Colonel and Mrs. Bantry, who are Miss Marple's friends, and Miss Marple, along with Dolly Bantry, begin to investigate. And their investigation takes them to a seaside resort, or a near seaside resort. So that one is the last detective novel I've read, or the most recent one. D is for Dostoyevsky. What is your favorite Dostoyevsky novel? None, because I've never read him. I remember reading bits of Crime and Punishment, because I think when I was a freshman in high school, we watched one of the film adaptations of Crime and Punishment, and I think we read selections from the novel, which is something similar to what we did with a book by Nadine Gordimer, although not watching the film adaptation, because I don't think her work's ever been adapted for film. But I've never really been all that drawn to reading Dostoyevsky. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to it, once my disdain for literary fiction and general fiction, or whatever the heck is going on between me and general literary fiction, is resolved. Not today, though, because it's very much in me not getting along with them. D is for diversity. Which book from your reading ticked the most diversity boxes? I'm going to say the Hexarchate series by Hurley. Hurley is himself a trans man of Korean descent. And his Hexarchate novels feature a plethora of alien species, as well as gender identities and sexualities. So I would say the Hexarchate series would definitely tick all of the boxes. D is for drawing. Who is your favorite visual artists. Now, I have a number of favorite visual artists, and while Jim had hoped or hopes that most of the answers for this particular prompt would feature artists who primarily draw. When it comes to the fine arts, I'm not as up on visual artists who primarily draw. But I will name a few of my favorite contemporary pastelists, or primarily pastelists, who use pastels that are little sticks of pigment that you can draw and paint with. So they are Marla Baguetta, Karen Margulis, and Alain Picard. Now, that's fine arts. If we're talking about, say, comic art and manga, my favorite comic artists are David Finch, who does weekly live streams on YouTube, and his work is amazing. Also, Nicholas Scott, who is probably my favorite comic book artist, and Jamie McKelvey, who I really like his character designs too. Although I don't know if either Nicholas Scott or Jamie McKelvey are really doing anything lately. I need to look into that. As far as manga goes, one of my favorites are like Hiro Mashima, who I particularly love, like the progression of his work that you can see throughout the Fairy Tales run, although really throughout his entire oeuvre, from Rave Master through Fairy Tale and into Eden Zero, his most current work. I'd also go with Tite Kubo, particularly his character designs. I quite like those, and others. I've been picking up some manga lately. We'll visit that for June's book haul, and probably into the future. I went a little insane. And I've been looking at particularly Masashi Kishimoto's Naruto, and I'm just like, the art is just much more amazing than I remember it being. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it, and I'll natter on about manga in the future. But anyway, now this is the end of the tag proper, and usually for the past iterations of this tag, Jim's found a reason to feature his dog Abby, and I kind of decided, well, I don't have a dog, largely because in part the landlord where I live doesn't allow dogs or cats or really any mammals. He's okay with fish. Not entirely sure of anything else, but just fish, as far as I know of. Also, my mom, who I take care of, she had a dog a few years ago that she was very emotionally attached to, and when that dog died, she was devastated. So we really haven't gotten another one, or she hasn't gotten another one since. And yeah, so what I decided to do was, when appropriate, I might mention the antics of the 4 children of the apocalypse, my 2 nieces and 2 nephews, and we are at D, and D is for Death, who is the youngest of the 4 children of the apocalypse. He is incredibly destructive and delightful at the same time. Whenever he comes into my room, he just zeroes in on trying to make as much mischief as he can. But he is so adorable when he does it that you just really can't be upset with him for too long. And whenever he comes over and whenever we have video calls, he is always like just the center of attention, just the because he's always up to something. And it always brings a smile to my face and my mom's face, and it is just incredibly fun. So yeah, that was the Z tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. And I will see you tomorrow, hopefully with another video. And if not, then certainly I will see you on Friday with Weekly Read. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.